This is the time where fans are often conflicted over things like the Justice League Snyder Cut or whether Marvel movies count as cinema. It can be nice to look back at a time not so long ago where everyone agreed just to have fun in a truly great movie. That's why everyone loves to talk about the least divisive movie of all time, Star Wars: The Last Jedi, right? Yeah, right. It's been a while since Rian Johnson dropped his ambitious sci-fi epic, but people still talk about it like it was released yesterday. Some fans absolutely hate it, while other fans adore its bold ideas. The film certainly isn't perfect. Was Benicio del Toro in it? It's hard to even remember that part, though it did have more than its fair share of epic space battles and legendary moments. So let's look back at some of the scenes in the Star Wars franchise's most controversial entry that were undeniably awesome. There's no part of The Last Jedi that's more controversial than the ultimate fate of Luke Skywalker. Many fans were upset to see the formerly heroic Jedi so jaded and miserable that he was willing to throw his lightsaber away. It seems as though the Skywalker we knew was long gone. Then came the end of the movie where our heroes were trapped with the First Order ready to wipe out the Resistance. That's when Luke reappeared to single-handedly save the galaxy. He stepped towards the enemy, facing them down like a mighty samurai warrior. Kylo Ren, or Supreme Leader Ren, should we say, ordered every blaster to fire on the old man. General Hux thought it was a bit much, but sure enough, old Skywalker was still standing. Not only that, but he brushed off his shoulder as if the entire barrage was nothing to him. Love him or hate him, you gotta admit that old man Luke still has some attitude. There might be no new character that's been as divisive in the Star Wars series as Admiral Hoth. The purple-haired Resistance leader, as played by Laura Dern, rubbed a lot of fans the wrong way with her sneaky leadership choices. She played her strategy against the First Order so close to the chest that Poe Dameron led a mutiny against her. Turns out that she was just playing the enemy the whole time, but things still weren't looking good for Team Resistance. Then Holdo changed the entire interstellar warfare game. She essentially turned her ship into a giant lightspeed missile. The ship fired through space and ripped the First Order vessel to pieces. Holdo may not have thrilled fans at first, but her noble sacrifice redeemed her in the eyes of many, though nobody really gets the purple hair. There's nothing more Star Wars than seeing a master have a lightsaber duel with a former pupil. We've seen Yoda take on Count Dooku, and Anakin fight Obi-Wan twice. Though let's be honest, both Vader and Kenobi phoned in the rematch. It was only a matter of time before Luke Skywalker had to face his old student, Ben Solo. His nephew took too much after his grandfather and went full dark side. He even destroyed a Jedi temple just like his granddaddy. Hopefully there weren't any younglings. There probably were younglings. So Luke was pretty angry with the young man for his betrayal. Meanwhile, Ben was still pretty peeved over the whole thing, where his uncle thought about snuffing him out during his sleep. Their confrontation was built up to be one of the greatest lightsaber duels ever, but once they started going at it, something was wrong. Their sabers never touched. Then it was revealed that Luke wasn't even there. The whole thing was just an illusion. To be honest, it was the ultimate Jedi moment. The mostly pacifist warriors preached about the merits of defensive combat. Letting your enemy dance around your Jedi mind trick without attacking him is about as defensive as it gets. Obi-Wan would be proud. Rey and Kylo Ren have the strangest and most interesting relationship in the sequel trilogy. Relationship meant in the platonic sense. Calm down, Reylo shippers, and keep it to your fanfic. While both often profess to hate one another, in a strange way they are the only ones who understand how the other feels. They are both isolated young people that are huge parts of a mythic intergalactic saga, whether they want to be or not. So their shared desire to find common ground makes a lot of sense. This crescendos into a beautiful moment where the two work together to take on the Praetorian Guard. It's one of the most unique and well-choreographed fights of the entire series. Just as long as you don't look at the dudes in the background who are just waiting for their turn to attack. Maybe the Praetorians just really believe in combat decorum. The alliance between the two was short-lived, but for half a second we saw how epic the two would be if they teamed up. Though someone needs to remind Kylo that he has the ability to freeze people with the Force, it seems like he kind of forgets he could do that. The sequel trilogy is all about bringing back the characters from the original films for one last ride. Han Solo, Leia Organa, Luke Skywalker, Chewie, and the droids all get moments to shine. All of them were heavily featured in the trailers and promotional materials as well. There was one character who was in The Last Jedi that was kept away from the trailers. Famous Jedi Master Yoda returned one last time to visit his last pupil Luke Skywalker in his ultimate time of need. Not only that, but he has some truly epic words of wisdom to drop before he faded away again. He taught Luke to let go of the past and to truly embrace the fact that Luke failed pretty epically to reform the Jedi. Luke was lucky that he didn't drop in an "I told you so" to his old student who never wanted to take the time to learn properly. Specifically, he told Luke that the greatest teacher failure is A guy that watched his people get destroyed and then lived alone on a swamp planet had a long time to think about failure. Star Wars The Force Awakens was a little light on the Star Wars. It didn't feature nearly as many space battles as its predecessors did. The Last Jedi was out to rectify this in the opening scene. Here we saw hotshot pilot Poe Dameron take on the First Order in a way that demonstrates why he's the best in the Resistance. Not only does he fly up to the First Order vessels without any fear, but he throws in a few insults to General Hux while he's at it. Too bad he couldn't see Hux's eyebrows. That's a treasure trove of mockable material. It's like he's got the head of a ginger troll doll above his eyes. Then Poe flew in and took on the Dreadnought all by himself. In one of the most impressive feats of flying we've seen so far, he takes out all of its cannons. He zipped through that blaster fire in such an impressive fashion that Luke Skywalker's trench run looked like shooting womp rats. It's too bad his X-Wing got destroyed later on in the movie. If only there was another famous spacecraft that Poe could fly. You know, something that could make the Kessel Run in less than 12 parsecs. Seriously, how has he not flown the Falcon yet? It's no secret that George Lucas's original Star Wars took inspiration from Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress, along with The Searchers, Flash Gordon serials, and Lawrence of Arabia. Last Jedi director Rian Johnson decided to take a page out of Lucas's original playbook. He decided to take inspiration from another of Kurosawa's beloved films. Rashomon is the story of a crime told from the perspectives of several different witnesses. Each witness tells a completely different version of the events, and we never get a clear answer as to what actually happened. If you've seen The Last Jedi, you know exactly which scenes he took inspiration for. We finally found out what happened between Luke and Ben that drove onto the dark side, and the other into exile. Shockingly, the answer is that Luke considered cutting down his nephew while he slept. According to Ben, he actually attacked a child. Then Ben turned to evil as a way of coping with the betrayal. Luke's story differed just a little bit. According to him, he received a vision of all the evil things his nephew was going to do and had a moment of temptation. For someone who lived through the Galactic Civil War and saw firsthand how brutal the Empire was, this is a bit understandable. Kylo Ren did help destroy several different planets when Starkiller Base fired in The Force Awakens. To Luke's credit, he decided against the action. Too bad Ben saw his former master consider it. Ironically, it turned out that Luke caused his own horrifying vision to come true. We'll likely never know which of these versions was the truth. The answer is probably somewhere in the middle. One of the biggest complaints about the sequel trilogy is that it doesn't feature the original characters enough. The books that made up the extended universe were all about the continued adventures of Luke, Leia, and Han. The sequel trilogy decided to pivot to new characters like Rey, Finn, and Poe. That being said, less is more approach to the older characters has worked to make their scenes feel special. Pretty much every scene with the late Carrie Fisher is a tearjerker. Harrison Ford also effortlessly dropped into Han Solo again, a feat that he failed to do with Indiana Jones. We don't get to see the three of them together in the trilogy, but we do get a few moments of both men with Leia. While Leia and Han's reunion was bittersweet, Luke's was more memorable. Leia was hopeless, and all her former allies were ghosting her calls for help. Her brother, always one for dramatic entrances, decided to save her one last time. They reunited for just 1 second, but it was enough to leave the entire audience misty-eyed. If that wasn't enough, Rian Johnson even included Han's lucky dice into the scene. Really had to hit us where it hurt, didn't you, Ryan? Supreme Leader Snoke's ego makes a guy like Emperor Palpatine seem humble. If nothing else, he has to call himself Supreme Leader just to top Palpatine's Emperor status. Even his holographic images of himself were larger than anyone else's. Did you really have to adjust the settings on your image until you were like 20 feet tall, Snoke? Would 10 feet just not have done it? The ego is on full display in The Last Jedi in an even grander fashion. For one, we see how Snoke likes to dress. There isn't a single person who wears silky golden robes as if they care what people think of them. He also never thought that his pupil Kylo Ren would betray him, despite the fact that he was always glaring at Snoke, and Sith have a habit of turning on their masters. Ben might as well have been wearing a sign around his neck that said, "I'm gonna betray Snoke." Still, Snoke told Kylo to turn his saber against his true enemy, which is just about the easiest setup he could have given Ren. Using the Force, Ren turned his saber towards Snoke and ignited it right into the middle of his chest. Then he pulled the blade through Snoke, slicing him up like a loaf of bread. Ouch. So what's the lesson here, folks? Well, probably something about pride coming before a fall. The real lesson is that you should never wear your golden pajamas to work. No matter how much you think it distracts from your burned up face, it makes you look like a jerk and your co-workers might kill you. Fans were really excited to see Captain Phasma in Force Awakens. She was one of the more interesting mysteries from the trailers and even made for a pretty great action figure. Then the movie came out and Phasma got thrown down a trash compactor without making much of an impact. Everyone was hoping that she'd get more to do in The Last Jedi. While she didn't get much more screen time than she did in the first one, she certainly had more action. Finn shamed her pretty badly in Episode 7. Not only was he a deserter under her command, but he even threw her in the garbage and destroyed the First Order base. That had to be hard to explain to Phasma's quarterly review. so she was pretty happy to have FN 2187 back in her clutches after ordering a quick execution. First Order really don't do trials, do they? It seemed like her revenge was complete. Then everything went crazy and Finn got free. The two of them had a pretty epic duel before Finn finally defeated his former master. What's really interesting about this scene is that we got a glimpse of Phasma's humanity underneath. Underneath that chrome helmet, we saw her sad blue eyes, just for 1 second before she met her grisly end, and she was a person again. It's a pretty notable end for a character who could have just been forgotten. We've known ever since the Return of the Jedi that Luke wasn't the only Skywalker with the potential to become a Jedi. The movie revealed that Leia was his twin sister and thus had the potential to be just as powerful in the Force. In the extended universe, Luke trained his sister to become a Jedi just like him. So when Disney announced their sequel trilogy, fans were curious if Leia would be a Jedi like her book counterpart. Unfortunately, Leia did not spend her time between trilogies learning the Jedi arts. She did spend that time taking over leadership duties of the Resistance. If you can't be a Jedi Master, a general of an interstellar army is pretty awesome. She did show her Force sensitivity in The Last Jedi. Audiences panicked when Leia was sucked into the void of space. Luckily, that was not the end for her character, though it was the end for Admiral Akbar. R.I.P. Squidman, you won't be forgotten, even though you were kind of immediately forgotten. Leia instinctively reached out with the Force and flew through space and back to the ship. The rumor is that it would have been just the start of her journey with the Force. Unfortunately, she passed away before Rise of Skywalker, so we'll never see what they had planned for her. Love you, Carrie. Of all the characters in the sequel trilogy, one has made the biggest impression. The lonely scavenging orphan Rey was likable from her first scene. After a long day of work, she went to her AT-AT apartment and sat with a Rebel pilot helmet on, looking at the stars. From that moment on, she was the new franchise's most powerful player. Not to mention the fact that composer John Williams gave her an incredible theme. He could probably make Hannibal Lecter seem like a sweet protagonist if he tried. For most of The Last Jedi, our go-to hero was out of the action, while she was chilling with Luke in what looked like the Shire's beachfront property. The Resistance was in some serious trouble. Luckily, Rey came in the final hour to save her friends. After spending the entire movie struggling with Master Skywalker's lessons, she was finally able to master the Force. Rey moved the boulders out of the way so they could all stage their escape. From the look of Rise of Skywalker, this is just the start of Rey's heroic journey as possibly both The Last Jedi and the Skywalker who rises. The original Star Wars movie featured a ton of iconic scenes. Things really didn't get kicking until Han, Luke, and Obi-Wan and all the gang got on the Millennium Falcon. That's where so many of the iconic scenes were filmed throughout all three movies. Even in The Force Awakens, the Falcon was home to some of the most heartwarming scenes, especially the famous "Chewie, we're home" bit. So everyone knew that The Last Jedi would feature at least one heartwarming scene in the famous ship. This time that honor was bestowed upon Luke Skywalker. He got to walk through the old vessel for the first time in decades. We may never get to see all three of our main heroes back in that cockpit again, but that moment was certainly powerful enough. In The Rise of Skywalker, it looks like Lando is going to get the heartwarming Falcon scene. That does make sense considering it was originally his ship until Han won it in a card game. Maybe he'll finally get it back at the end. The circle's now complete. The brutal moments started out early in The Last Jedi. During Poe's assault on the First Order dreadnought, Paige Dico made the ultimate sacrifice for the Resistance. In one of the most unnerving scenes of the film, Dico struggled to get her bomber to drop its payload and destroy the vessel beneath her. She clutched a strange-looking necklace to her chest in the end, right before an explosion took her life. At first it seemed like this was just a random character moment for someone we'd never see again. Little did we know it would actually inform the arc of one of The Last Jedi's most important characters. Rose Dico possibly has the most tenacity of anyone in the Resistance. Not everyone volunteers for mutiny guard duty. This doesn't make sense at first until you realize that her sister was the one who gave her life in the beginning of the movie. It gives her story more weight and shows that her dedication to save Finn from sacrificing himself comes from a place of heartbreak and love. She just couldn't lose anyone else. There may not be a cheer-in-your-seat movie moment that's better than Han saving Luke at the end of A New Hope. That shot in the Falcon soaring in to save the day in the last minute was one of the most iconic moments in the entire film. So anytime the Falcon soars in to save the day, it takes you right back to the first time you saw that scene. That's exactly how it felt when Chewie flew the ship through Crate to fight against the First Order. What's so great about this scene is that Chewie is finally the one to get the spotlight for a second. His buddies Han and Luke are always getting all the attention while he gets sidelined. He famously didn't even get a medal at the end of A New Hope. Well, now you've got your due, you big furball. Go get him, Chewie! Yes, those were the very best scenes from The Last Jedi. Which one was your favorite? Let's be honest, it was Luke brushing off the blaster fire. Come on. As far as cool gets, it's really hard to top that. Were there any other great scenes we missed? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more of your favorite content from CBR. Thanks for watching!